In today's chess opening video, we're taking a look at the Colorado Gambit or Coloradocountergambit, which follows the Nimzowitsch Defense. A great response for black against the move of e4 as we play this move of knight c6. Now, this is a sound move for black, and it's also rare. Okay, when you mix those two things together, you get a pretty dangerous option. Just because something's rare doesn't mean it's dangerous. Doesn't mean that it's going to help you get more wins, right? For example, if we play this move of knight h6 with the wild bull defense, or as chess.com puts it, the hippopotamus defense, which I take offense to. This is rare, right? And this is so rare because it's so bad. What does this move do? Nothing good. Where's this knight going? I don't know. Hopefully back to g8, because this knight, you can't go to g4 and you can't go to f5 because both of those spots are covered, right? That's just a terrible move. However, going back, the move of knight c6, this is a good option. This centralizes our knight. We're fighting for squares like d4 and e5. And if we do see something like d4, now we have a big decision to make. Do we want to go with the Scandinavian variation, or do we want to go with the Kennedy variation? Now, I've been making some content on the Kennedy. I'm a big fan of it. In 60% of online games on the Elite Chess database, you see the move of d5. This is very high with the Link Springer variation. And what are we doing as black? Well, we're playing knight e7, looking to bring this knight over to g6. And if white tries to steamroll us, guess what? Knight g6. We're just clearly better right now, guys. Okay, especially if white captures or plays a move like f5, because we throw in a check. I mean, if you want to block, go ahead. I mean, thanks for the pawn, thanks for the rook. If you want to play king e2, we take with check. And if king d2 there, we play knight f6, looking to capture on e4 with check against the king potentially. I've reached this kind of position multiple times against very high-level competition, and when played correctly, white just doesn't survive very long, right? So that's the thing, right? We see knight c6. We're hoping, as a Nimzowitsch Defense player, to see the move d4. But what if you see knight f3? You could play a Williams variation with d6. You could play e5, but now we're just in an e4, e5 opening. And unless you're an e4, e5 player, you might not be comfortable with this, right? And this is the thing. You want to think about, okay, what openings am I comfortable with? What openings am I not? If you're an e4, e5 player and you love the Kennedy variation for black, why not give it a shot? I mean, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to be playing an e4, e5 opening, right? That's fine. But if you don't like the move of e5, there is an option here with the move of f5, with the Colorado Gambit, as many call it, or on chess.com, the Coloradocountergambit. And I'll just start out by saying this is not sound in the sense of, if you're playing against Magnus Carlsen or Hikaru Nakamura, if they play it correctly, or really if anyone plays it correctly, black is worse. So let's start out by saying that. But for the compensation that you get, for the traps that are available, for the amount of mistakes that white could easily fall into, we're only down 0.9. Okay, white has a 0.9 evaluation advantage in this position. They're not even +1. So for a gambit, that's actually not too bad, right? And by playing the move f5, we're immediately looking to strike on e4 with our flank pawn. Notice this queen h5 move right now, you can't do it because of the knight's in the way. And about 77% of online games, white will either capture on f5 or they'll push with e5. In either of those instances, right, we have things that we can do. We have options that we can fall back on. And that's really what the brunt, right, the main focus of this video is going to be is, okay, in 77% of games, you're going to see one of these two moves. These are really the two moves in which case white is trying to fight for an advantage. How do we respond? And sure, you could see a move like knight c3. This is played 8% of the time, but I mean, we just take on e4. We play knight f6. I mean, we're very close to equal now, guys. If you take on f6, we capture back with the e-pawn. We got moves like d5, bishop d6, looking at castle kingside. We're okay, right? We have ourselves a pretty nice position here. So, that's really nothing that we need to be too concerned about. I think the things we really need to be concerned about are, number one, what happens if white takes the pawn, which is very common, and what happens if white pushes. Okay, let's first take a look at e takes f5. In this case, we're going to play d5. We're going to play the move d5. Now, we're going to be going over d4, okay, which is very popular from white. But what if white goes, you know what, I'm going to take this pawn and I'm going to try to hold on to it? Well, let's look at a few different options. First off, if g4, white pushing that pawn, let's play h5. Let's ask that pawn what it's doing, right? Let's see what they're about. Now, sure, if you want to push, we'll take on f5. We're clearly better here. And now I do want to mention, we play d5, and then, right, we see this move d5. We also see the move of f5. And because of that, e5 is weak. So we do have a weakness on e5 there, right? I mean, going back to the very start, when we play d5, e5 is weak. right? But white can also very easily form some weaknesses. One of those examples, as we just saw, right? You know, white here playing g4. We play the move h5. And now if g5, we capture back with the bishop. I mean, where's white's kingside right now? I don't know. I mean, white's kingside's not feeling too great. We do have the edge in development. This pawn is very far extended. And yeah, I mean, black here with a very comfortable game. If we see h3, that's not going to do nothing. Nothing good. I mean, we just take on g4. Thank you for the rook. And if you capture on h5, bishop captures back. We're down a pawn, but I mean, this pawn is very weak. White's just not going to be able to hold on to that. And if d4 is played, I mean, we could just keep developing, play a move like queen d6. This is a little bit better than queen d7 because if we do see bishop b5, we'd rather just have a bishop, you know, pinning a knight to a king than a queen and a king. And in this case, we can castle queenside and just keep playing fun, aggressive chess. You know, I mean, if white wants to take the knight, fine, we'll capture back. We're going to keep developing our pieces here and go after the enemy king. White, on the other hand, this is just not a position they're probably used to. And that's probably why the Colorado Gambit has such a strong percentage, right? I mean, black has a winning percentage online with the Colorado Gambit, right? Winning percentage. So it's a fun option, and yeah, it does pretty well. So that's one way that white can try to defend the pawn is g4. In that case, let's play h5. Let's go after that pawn structure right away, not let them get comfortable and settled, but go into that pawn structure. White just doesn't have the infrastructure to hold it altogether. And yeah, I mean, let's say we see a move here like bishop d3. Okay, this is a fairly common response as well. You know, white here really looking to defend that pawn. And in that case, we can play knight h6. Okay, this is a move that I personally like, both pieces aiming towards that pawn on f5. And, you know, sure, if white wants to castle, right, I mean, we could just capture back the pawn on f5, right? We could capture back with the bishop. We could capture back with the knight, depending on what white does. It really depends. Do you want to finish out the position with the knight, or would you rather finish that position out with a diagonal moving bishop? But let's say white plays knight h4. Okay, this is a line that you definitely want to memorize. Knight h4, big mistake from white. We play this move of e5, and this position is somehow winning for black. And if not winning, very close. Okay, we have a huge edge in the eval now. And, you know, first off, let's say a move like g3. Why would white play that? Well, the second we play e5, we're threatening to take the knight. All right, that knight's about to fall. So if white does play g3, we can play bishop e7. You know, in this kind of case, if we see a move like, let's just say we see a move like queen h5 with check. Okay, we'll block with the knight. We're fine there. If knight g2, we can capture back with our knight in this instance. That's probably a pretty good idea because if white does capture back, that bishop's going to be very strong, especially against, you know, dark squared pawns on the king side, so that we have all those light squared weaknesses that we could go after. But following e5, queen h5 would check. I mean, I'll be honest, this just looks dead lost for black, right? We play the move of g6. This is one of the craziest lines I've ever seen in opening theory, by the way. We play g6. White captures back. What do we do now? Right? It just looks like we're dead lost. Well, we have one move. We have one move here that's winning for black, and that's bishop g4. Anything else, we're done. Notice this queen is trapped. This queen cannot save itself. The best thing that white can do is play g7 with check, capture our rook, and make another queen. In this case, we're taking on h4. White can take on h7. We castle queenside. We don't have anything forced here. It's not like we have a forced mate in 4, forced mate in 5, forced win a rook right away. But the engine loves black's position here, even though we're down 4 points in material. Okay, white here has 2 pieces developed. We have 7 pieces developed. Okay, so 5 pieces developed that they don't. Okay, I mean, this side of the board, I don't know how you're going to get all these guys active. The knight can jump out, but that's about it for the moment. And very active pieces here. Okay, and I just played some moves. I said, you know what, I'm going to play some moves against Stockfish and see what Stockfish does against me. Because honestly, when I look at this position, sure, black has great attacking chances. There's a lot of things that we could see here. On top of being up, you know, in development, we have complete control of the center, which is great for us. So, you know, e4, as an example, is always something we can think about. Our knight could jump in at some point and get busy. But I was just thinking, okay, I'm going to play as white. How is Stockfish going to beat me, right? So I go, you know what, I'm going to castle kingside. Stockfish here goes, I'm going to play knight d4. I go, you know what, I'm going to play f3. I'm just going to, you know, offer up, a little bit of protection for that f3 square. And the engine goes, I don't care, I'm going to take that pawn. Then the engine goes, I'm going to check. And now queen h3, going after that weak f7 pawn. Now the queen can't move and defend it without getting captured, right? The queen can't go to f7, f5, e4. This is a hard pawn to defend. So, okay, bishop e2, the engine plays e4, right? We're down 6 points in material, but black is winning this position. If queen g7 trying to somehow get back in this game, rook g8, guess what? If you move that queen somewhere safe, the game's over. Okay, so it turns out in that crazy line, okay, so when we play that move e5, if white plays queen h5, we can just play g6. If you capture back a bishop g4, you can get your queen, but we're going to have great attacking chances out of that, okay? In fact, we're just going to have a winning position, okay? So really something to keep in mind in that kind of instance. Now going back to the move of d5, how else can white defend it? Well, knight h4. In that case, let's play knight h6. Okay, I'm a big fan of this move. Again, if bishop d3 trying to defend it again, e5, we're winning there. And if queen h5 would check, we can play knight f7, just drop that knight back. In this case, this whole trying to trap the queen idea, isn't the best idea because, once we follow the line and then we play bishop g4 check, right? Sure, we get the queen and all that, but at the end of this, it's not the same, right? We don't have the same control that we did in the previous line. We don't have the same development. Our queen can't just, run in and take that knight right away, which is huge. So now we're down 6 instead of, down 3 and then down 4 the next move. But all I have to say, right, in this case, okay, we can play knight f7. And the second most popular move, I mean, this is the thing. When you play something this rare like the Colorado Gambit, your opponents are going to make mistakes left and right, right? The most common move for white here is bishop b5. The second most common, knight g6. Blunder. We take the knight. Right? There's a lot of openings out there. You play the Sicilian, you play the French. Your opponent's probably not going to blunder on the 6th move. You play the Colorado Gambit, they just might. Right? Knight g6, we capture back. Guess what? That's defended by the knight. And that's not a normal type of position that white sees, but that's the position nonetheless. And sure, white can take on g6, and we can now look to kick that queen around. Right, play a move like e6, put some pressure on that f5 pawn. There's a lot of moves besides e6 there, but I do think that e6 is good. Putting pressure on f5, trying to open up that diagonal against the queen, giving our bishop and queen some leverage and ability to develop nicely. And yeah, I mean, that's just a nice position. And okay, let's say we see the move bishop e5, a much better move from white. We can play g6 again, right? By the way, let's say we see queen f3. Big mistake again, g5. The knight's trapped. Okay, so white there really should play a move like queen g4, in which case we'll play bishop g7 with a little bit of pressure, towards that side of the board. If white does capture on g6, we can capture back, right? You could take all you want, that's fine. At the end of the day, your queen's going to have to move somewhere, and the queen can't move anywhere safely while defending that knight. So you might as well take on g6. You might as well, pick up a pawn or two after that. But at the end of all this, after queen f6, we're down 1 point in material, but the engine says that black is completely crushing this position. We simply have too much development, too much activity. It's a crazy position, right? I mean, we literally have 3 pawns on the board right now at move 12. I mean, how often does that happen in opening theory? But again, the Colorado Gambit, one of the craziest gambits I've ever seen in my life, and this line's one of the ways that kind of shows that off. And finally, going back to the move d5, what should white play here? Well, white shouldn't defend the pawn. White should play the move of bishop to b5. In that case, we capture back. What should white do here? Knight e5. Right? We play bishop d7. And yeah, I mean, in this instance, white should take on c6 with the bishop, but you often see queen h5 with check. Right? And this is not the best move for white. Okay, now they're not losing or anything, but in this case, we play g6. You take back with the knight. Okay, knight f6. If you move the knight somewhere with check, thanks for the queen. We're good with that. And if you move the queen, to f3, e2, whatever, we take the knight. So the queen has to move while maintaining this pin on the rook. This is, again, one of those crazy lines where we're about to go down a bunch of material, but somehow Stockfish is telling us the position is dead even after taking on g6, playing knight b4, eyeing up that pawn on c2, right, with that knight. And if bishop d3 defending it, we capture back. Bishop f5, and we go after that pawn, right? So, yeah, I mean, this is great for us. And again, white should take on c6. In that case, we'll capture back. If castling kingside, we can play knight f6. Just develop our pieces, guys. We're not down anything right now. If you want to take on c6, we capture back. If d4, I will say white is better here. I don't think they have a forced win or anything like that. But I'll be honest, black's in trouble. We have big weaknesses here. White really doesn't have any to speak of. Our weaknesses being c5. This is a hole. No pawn of ours can attack / defend that for the rest of the game. e5. None of our pawns can attack / defend. Same with e6. Right? I mean, we definitely have some gaping weaknesses. If we ever play e6, that pawn's going to become a huge target. So that's what white should do, right? White should capture. We should see the move of bishop e5. Once we capture back on f5, knight e5 is a good move there. Just capturing calmly on c6 and, developing, trading down, and just getting a nice positional edge. But if you look at online chess, the chances of white going into this line all the way, into that refutation, is just very rare, okay? Very rare. And again, that's the advantage of playing something rare, is that, okay, right, you play something that, might not be super sound, right? Again, the Nimzowitsch Defense is sound. The Colorado Gambit is not, but it's very easy for white to mess it up. And even then, it's about a +1 advantage, 0.9 advantage. So it's very close. Another opening that I recommend to people, right, that's very rare, very sound, is the Czech Pierce Defense. Okay, this month, because we just released this course on the Czech Pierce, we are offering a 30% off discount code for the month of September. All you got to do, click the link below. I'll leave it down in the pinned comment and the description. All you got to do, go to that link, plug in the discount code of Czech Pierce 2024, and you will receive 30% off that course. Only good until the end of September 2024. Back to the content. So we see this move d5, right? Now, what you see a lot in online chess is the move d4, which makes sense, right? And honestly, this is a much better move than some of the stuff we've looked at, right? I mean, white playing g4, for example, big mistake. In this case, what are we going to do? Well, we can capture back on f5. And again, white can play bishop b5. In this case, we do have a little bit of an advantage, though, and that's that we can play e6, at least compared to the last line, and that we can play e6 and knight g e7, so that the knight is able to defend on c6 without our bishop having to run back. If castling kingside, for example, well, after a6, I mean, this is an equal position, right? Maybe even a little bit better for black. After bishop takes a check, we capture back with the knight, we capture back and forth. Now, this feels a lot different than the previous position to me. We have the bishop pair. We're able to very, quickly develop here, maybe play a move like bishop d6, castle kingside, e5 and c5 breaks feel a little bit more realistic for us, and that's great, right? Because we have bad pawn structure here. We want to, play a move like e5 at some point, play a move like c5 at some point, and fix it up a little bit. But going back to bishop takes f5, bishop d3, very common move. The engine seems to like e6 just barely, but bishop g4 is a much more dangerous move, right? And usually against this, white will play c3 because, it appears as if we're threatening knight takes d4 and the knight is, pinned to the queen. But turns out white can just play h3, right? White doesn't have to worry about us taking on d4 because of queen h5 would check. And in this case, g6, guess what? Queen e5 can be played. Our rook's attacked. The knight's attacked. We're going to lose one of them. We're going to lose one, right? And if we play king d7, well, white can play queen g4, right? Going after a knight, checking the king, and white there is, white's simply winning that position. So after queen takes f3, in this case, we got to play knight f6. Remember, guys, we're not down a pawn, right? We took the pawn back. We're at even material. e6 is our biggest weakness to date. And if we see a move like c3, e5, let's break this open in the center. Let's get rid of that whole e6 weakness. And if white wants to capture back, okay, we capture back with the knight, play a move here like queen e7, match that energy on the e-file. We can take on d3, castle queenside. Someone walks by, it looks like a pretty normal position all of a sudden, even though our way of getting here wasn't normal in the slightest. Going back to bishop g4. If you do see a move like c3, e5 is the move here, and you've reached equality, right, or very near to it. Again, black performs very well in these types of positions. We're looking towards, we're pinning that knight. We're looking at e4. We're putting pressure on t4. We're advancing in the center. If white captures back, we take back with the knight. By the way, queen a4 check. If you see that, just play bishop d7. The best thing white can do is go back with the queen and defend both pieces. And if you see that, okay, let's take the bishop. Let's throw in a check. We're just playing chess from this point. And if bishop e2, we can capture on f3, take again, play queen d7, right? That bishop was putting a lot of pressure on d5, so we got rid of it. Queen, d7. You castle. You could also play knight f6 there and just develop. I mean, if check, we have bishop e7, you're fine there, right? I mean, if queen e2, for example, trying to go after that bishop, you can just castle. I mean, if white does take that bishop, which almost seems free, or it does to some maybe, rook fe8, we're winning. You can take the queen. We got a back rank mate. You can move the queen to c5, b4, a3, wherever you move it. back rank mate. The best move that white has is queen e3. In that case, we capture, play a move like knight g4. We're +1 in material. We have a queen. Our opponent just doesn't. And that's, yeah, pretty big advantage practically. Now, stepping back to this f5 move with the Colorado Gambit, again, if you're playing this as white, if you ever see this as white, right, you should take that pawn on f5. Against d5, you should play bishop b5 there. And against capturing, play knight e5. Just go after that knight on c6, make some pawn structure weaknesses, some holes to go after. You're even material, but you just have a much better game of chess, positionally speaking. But there's so many times, in fact, the large majority of games where white misses this because, again, the Colorado Gambit is so rare. And honestly, it just looks so bad that I think, you know, a lot of players are just going to have a hard time ever wanting to study for it because it just looks so terrible, right? Now, what if we see the move e5? In this case, play d6. Start going after that pawn, okay? If e captures on d6, very common move from white, you could take with the queen, right? So a lot of people take back with the c-pawn. This isn't the best idea. Queen takes is very playable, but I personally like e5. I mean, this performs extremely well. We're now looking to capture back with our bishop, and if we could capture back with the bishop and we're at even material and we have this huge pawn central advantage, I mean, this is great for us. This is fantastic. And if white takes, okay, we capture back with the queen. This is sound for black, and we're just going to start developing, right? Play a move like knight f6, right? Play a move like bishop d6. These are all, you know, I'm plugging in, you know, the top options from white in terms of what's played the most. And, okay, if d4, all right, let's play e4, right? In that case, d4 just doesn't work. e4 can be played. If knight e5, you know, we could take on e5 and get our material back, but why not keep the heat on a little bit? Keep the pressure on a little bit. Castle kingside. If they want to capture, we'll capture back. You know, bishop f4 defending the knight. Let's attack that bishop. If you want to defend the bishop, bishop a6, right? That bishop wasn't very active. Now it's very active, attacking the rook on f1. And play a move like rook a8 here. Really, this knight on e5, you know, sure, no pawn can kick it out, but we have so much pressure against it, and we're attacking this bishop on f4. We're looking to take, looking to play c5, and you know, ask that pawn the question, what are you going to do, right? That pawn has a huge job of defending that knight. What are you going to do? The knight on e5 also cannot move right now, which is definitely in our favor. So all that to say, against e5, play d6. If white captures, play e5. Be ready to go down a pawn. And yeah, that's just a very fun game. Now, what if white defends it with d4? Now, this is a mistake. Right, we're just going to take on e5. By the way, if knight takes e5, you could go for this queen takes d4 line, right? Stockfish barely likes knight takes e5 more, though. And then just trading down, playing a move like e6. And yeah, I'd give the practical edge to black. Going back again, if d4, we can capture back. If the pawn takes, again, take the queen, play e6, bishop e5, common move, bishop d7, knight c3, common move. We can tuck the knight, bishop g5, a6. Let's kick the bishop. Let's play knight g6 now. Going after that pawn on e5. We're looking at moves like h6. We're looking at ideas like bishop c5. And we have ourselves a very playable game here. And going back, if we see a move like bishop b5, well, we can take on e5, right? Take on e5, play queen d5 there. Key idea. I do want to mention queen h5 with check there. We don't got to be worried about it. g6, if you take queen e4 with check, there's only one move here for white that's not losing. And that move is king to f1. For example, let's say we see king d1. Well, we play knight f6. And once this queen moves, right, let's say to h4 to keep that tension there, we're going to take on g2. Guess what? The king's not defending that. We're attacking the rook, right? And if you take our rook, we're going to take yours with check. If you save your rook, we have queen captures on g6. And yeah, I mean, we're just +3 material, and your king cannot even castle, right? So this isn't great for white. And again, right, we're going over this line again. So queen h5 with check. We block. Knight takes. We throw in a check. White really needs to play the move king f1 to defend g2. In that case, we can play knight f6. If you play queen h4, we can take on c2 as one example. And you know, if a move like knight c3, another crazy position where we take on g6, white takes on h8, and somehow we're slightly better there, even though we're down material. And by the way, if you take the rook, queen d1, this game is over. Going back to queen d5. If knight takes c6, let's take on g2. Okay, let's take on g2. I mean, if you want to move your rook or something, we'll take on c6. If you throw in a check, all right, c6 can be played. And in this case, you know, again, your bishop's hanging, your rook's hanging. You might as well get something for the bishop. If queen f3, we can trade. Multiple different moves here we have. c5 looking to fianchetto this bishop. g6 looking to fianchetto the dark squared bishop. In either case, you know, a nice advantage for black, practically speaking. And going back at bishop takes c6, this is what white should do. Right? They should take and then play knight f3, get the heck out of there. In this case, there's a lot of stuff that you can do. I think g5 is a crazy fun move. e5 is a crazy fun move. But yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, the Colorado Gambit, there's so many lines, there's so many trappy moves, there's so many crazy variations where we give our opponent material and they probably think they're winning, but they're not. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I wanted to give a big shout out to my Patreon supporters for the month of September in 2024. I appreciate y'all a ton. It's been great getting to know you guys. And for those of you that haven't thought about joining the Patreon, there's some exclusive benefits that you gain by becoming a member. And yeah, I mean, if you guys do join, I'm excited to start talking to you guys over on the platform. On top of that, guys, here's the thing. Look, it's September. Okay, it's September. There's only so much time left to get that Czech Pierce Defense course. Click the link. Click the freaking link, plug in the discount code, get your 30% off, only good until the end of the month, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Let's get it.